Hi, this is Abraham Walker with Keller Williams Realty Kingstown. Today we're going to talk about the value of a team. Now, the value of a team, this conversation started because agents right now are growing their businesses. Either A, they're becoming better real estate agents, or B, they're actually going out and hiring individuals. So I want to show you the value of actually going hire someone, and also the value of you joining a team that's actually hiring right now. MAPS Coaching has done a study that said that there are 50 hours in a real estate transaction, right? We're going to use this graph to show those 50 hours. So these are 50 hours that the rainmaker, right? For this example, the rainmaker is going to spend closing one transaction. Now, in Northern Virginia, or Fairfax County specifically, the average sales price is $417,000. Which leads to $11,500 in gross commission income, right? So that's how much income you earn off of one transaction. And in the Keller Williams model, right, our agents are on a 70-30 split. So the rainmaker is on a 70-30 split. So this 30% goes to the company, 70% goes to the rainmaker. 30% of $11,500 is $3,450. So this is the cost of sale to the rainmaker, and the 70% of that $11,500 is $8,050, right? So we've already calculated that 50 hours in a real estate transaction. So 50 goes into 8,050. How many times? $161 per hour. Yes, so that's why so many people actually become real estate agents. This number right here. Some people stop right here, right? Because real estate is a cyclical business, so there's ups and downs as far as your income and activities. So this $161 per hour may not be constant. So the next part of the process is actually to build a business around yourself. Gary Keller says that the next step in building a business around yourself is actually to hire an EA, right? And a transaction coordinator, right? So the EA handles all of the administrative tasks, marketing, and so on, and then a transaction coordinator handles all of the activities that are involved in a transaction itself. There's a principle called the 80-20 principle, or the Pareto principle. This 80-20 principle also shows up in the real estate business in that the administrative staff can take care of 80% of the tasks that are involved in a real estate transaction, with the rainmaker doing 20% of those tasks. So the administrative department can handle 80% of the tasks in the real estate transaction. Now, those 80% tasks include inputting listings, handling the transaction from the time you actually have an offer accepted to the time that it closes, taking photographs, etc. Those 20% tasks for the rainmaker include going on appointments, closing transactions, getting paperwork signed, getting new clients, and so on. Right? What's the operating expense for an EA and a transaction coordinator? Well, let's assume that the EA is going to be doing about 20 hours, right, of activity from this 50 hours of work that's lined up in one transaction, right? So out of the 50, the EA is going to handle 20 hours of that work. And let's say that we pay that person $10 per hour, right? You know what? For this example, let's assume, right? Let's assume that it's actually going to cost more. Let's assume that it's going to cost $15 per hour. So that's $300 for that one transaction. Right. So now we're on to the transaction coordinator. So let's talk about the transaction coordinator. So the transaction coordinator can be paid one of two ways. They can be paid on an hourly basis, right? And depending on the number of transactions you're currently doing, that hourly basis may be higher, right? Or they can be paid on a per transaction basis, which can range anywhere from $300 to $400 per transaction. So for this example, we're going to use $350 per transaction. So on the administrative side, your operating expense is going to be $650 operating expense for this one transaction. So we already have our first scenario right here. This is just the Rainmaker by themselves. So let's calculate what it would look like for the Rainmaker plus an administrative staff. So we're going to start off with this 80/50 number, right? Because of the split, and we want to deduct, we want to calculate. We're starting with this 80/50 number because we want to calculate what our take-home hourly wage would be after we've already split with Keller Williams Realty. So we have the 80/50 minus that $650 operating expense, which equals $7,400, right? And we've already assumed that the 80/20 rule exists, right? And so we're taking, the administrative staff is taking 80% of those tasks off the Rainmaker's plate. So that leaves the Rainmaker with 10 hours. So we're assuming that the EA and the transaction coordinator, or that administrative piece, is allowing the Rainmaker to work 10 hours per transaction because they have accounted for the 40 hours of activity, so that 80/20 rule. So we have 10 hours of work, and we're going to divide that 7,400 into 10 hours, which would leave the Rainmaker making $740 per hour, right? So as you can see, in scenario 2, this is actually more income that the Rainmaker would earn per transaction than working alone. So you may have questions about, well, what tasks are associated with this administrative piece of the business? Well, Gary Keller has produced a document called the 196 Task List for Mega Agents, right? This task list breaks down every task that can be associated with a real estate transaction, and it's available for your viewing. Just Google it, right? So what's the next logical step? We always have to ask ourselves, what's the next logical step if the Rainmaker wants to increase his income, right, and provide himself with more leverage? Because we've already shown that right now the Rainmaker is actually working 10 hours per transaction, right? So watch the dynamics, right? So at the beginning, the Rainmaker's doing everything, doing 50 hours of work, right? And now we have the Rainmaker actually doing 10 hours of work, right? Making more income. Is there a way for the Rainmaker to increase his income, his or her income, and do less work? Well, let's see. So the next part of the business that you would leverage per Gary Keller, and it's the next logical step, is you would get out of the buyer's business to get into more of the listing business. So you would get out of the buyer business to get into more of the listing business. So let's calculate what that means. So we have a buyer's agent now, and for every piece that we bring on, we still look at how the 80/20 principle affects that part of the business. So let's assume that the buyer's agent now represents the 80% of the Rainmaker's activities that are left in these 10 hours, right? So what is 80% of 10? Well, that's 8 hours, right? So the buyer's agent is doing those 8 hours, and then the Rainmaker now is doing 10 hours. So let's calculate what the buyer's agent would make in that scenario. So let's call that scenario 3, right? And for this scenario, we're actually going to start with the $11,500. So before the cost of sale to Keller Williams is taken out. Now, Gary Keller says that the buyer's agents should be paid a 50/50 split on commission. right? So a 50-50 split between the rainmaker and the buyer's agent, right? You can find that in the MRA book on page 206, paragraph 2, right? So in the MREA book, talks about the 50-50 split. That's page 206, paragraph 2. So let's calculate what the buyer's agent would make, right, on that side of the transaction. So 11,500 split 50-50 is 57.50 on this side and 57.50 on this side. And the buyer's agent also has a split with Keller Williams. Because they're on a team, that would be an 85-15 split. That's how the team structures are structured at Keller Williams Realty Kingstown, right? So that would mean that the 15% equals $863 in cost of sales to the buyer's agent, right? All right. And then this 85% of this 57.50 is $4,888, right? Now, this is the buyer's agent's net, because the buyer's agent does not have the administrative costs that's associated with running this business. That's on the rainmaker side of the business, right? So what did the buyer's agent make per hour now that all they're doing is showing properties, going on buyer presentations, ratifying contracts, and going to closings, etc.? Right. Well, in those 8 hours, the buyer's agent now is making $611 per hour, right? Which is more than they would make if they started their own company, right, and just went out on their own. So this shows you that the value of being on a team is not in the leads, right? The value in being on a team is that now the buyer's agent can essentially operate in this system without the expense of the administrative department. Also, the buyer's agent now does not have to create systems, because now the rainmaker's administrative staff are creating systems to make this buyer agent more money per hour than they could do on their own, right? So the value of a team is not in the leads. The value of the team is in the system that the buyer's agent is now in. Because think about it, if the buyer's agent does not have leads, then the buyer's agent could start to lead generate on their own and actually bring in more business for themselves and generate more income. Now, what's the value to the rainmaker, right, for actually doing this business? So what's the value in the rainmaker actually bringing on this buyer's agent to provide more leverage for themselves? Well, let's calculate that. So the rainmaker, as we stated at the beginning, the rainmaker is on a 70-30 split with Keller Williams. And so 30% of 57.50 is $17.50, right? That's that cost of sale to Keller Williams. And then the 70% is $4,025, right? Now the rainmaker still has to account for this operating expense, right? So 40.25 minus 650 is 33.75. And remember now, we're assuming that the 80-20 principle is accurate. And so the rainmaker now is working 2 hours in the business, right? So that brings the rainmaker's income per hour to $1,688 per hour. So there's no other position in the real estate company that makes this type of income per hour legally. Nothing that you can do legally, right? So as you can see, like this shows you that the rainmaker now is working 2 hours per transaction, right? They actually reduced that from 10 hours, which was a reduction from 50 hours. Now, the question you may be asking yourself, if you're a real estate agent in this current rainmaker system, well, what am I going to do? What's the purpose of actually growing this business? right? Like this. Well, the purpose of growing this business like this is now you can start to work on either other businesses, or you can start growing your business. You can start generating more income for the business itself. Start working on more projects. Now, let's look at what the value proposition is for the buyer's agent in this structure, because some buyer's agents are in this structure right now, and they may have the same ideas or thoughts that the Rainmaker has as far as increasing this dollar per hour that they're receiving in the business. So the next step for the buyer's agent is, let's assume that this buyer's agent in this team setup is making is closing 5 transactions per month, right? This buyer's agent now can actually bring on a showing assistant, right? A showing specialist to start to show properties and increase the number of homes that they can sell from 5 to 10. And we've seen this in our model with an assistant. So now the buyer's agent goes from 5 to 10, so essentially almost doubling their income, and now they just bear the expense of the showing assistant, which a showing assistant can be paid on two ways. They can be paid similar to the transaction coordinator. They can be paid on a per transaction basis or a percentage of the transaction. So you can assume that you'll pay the showing assistant either $200 per transaction, or in some models we've seen either 15 to 25% of the GCI. So as you can see, the buyer's agent now has leverage, the Rainmaker now has leverage, and so this is the value of building a team. This is the value of joining a team, and this is also the value of moving from a Rainmaker, right, into a business owner. Because this person now is no longer a Rainmaker. This is a business owner. I'm Abraham Walker, and thank you.